All right. Well, I believe that I am ready. If you are
All
ready.
right. I mean, I think that I'm mostly ready. I can't
Yeah.
I can't attest for the dude sitting behind me here.
Yeah. Having a good day today.
He's just having a fit. It's so nice outside, so he wants to go out and he likes just sitting in the middle of my front yard,
Yeah.
like so he can get the breeze all on him and stuff. But I can't just leave him out there like completely unattended because of hawks and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
but it's too breezy for me to sit out there and try and have this video.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. That would come through the audio real great. Just a constant.
yeah, yeah. And he's
But
got like they all have a setup on my front porch, like five dog beds and he wasn't happy there, so I put him right behind me with the front door open so he could look out, and apparently he's not happy there either. So he's just having an overall grumpy day today.
yeah. Well, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I
No.
tend to get a little bit like flustered when things just like don't go smoothly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was hoping that he would like eat and poop and settle down. And he decided that he kind of wanted to eat, but not really. And he didn't poop yet. And he's
Yeah.
like, F you, I'm not settling down.
Well,
So I'm just gonna sit behind you and whine.
yeah. Well, he's not coming through real loud unless he gets a little extra, so it's fine. I appreciate your effort there to maintain the illusion as well. Like same hat, looks like the same shirt.
Oh yeah, I did. I ran in and changed it back on. I was
Well,
like, ah, shit.
it's so funny because Gerdo did the same thing, and I'm in a different
Did
shirt now this time, like I was last time. Because I was like, oh yeah, it might end up being two episodes, be a two-parter or whatever. And so it's just so funny. Like, yeah, you guys are much more professional than I suppose.
I don't know about all that.
So I did want to say real quick though, because I was going over some of the stuff when I was rendering and moving some things around. It looked like a couple of moments where you were describing some of the stuff that was happening in your life that wasn't quite so pleasant, and it looked like I was kind of giggling and smirking at times. And I hope you don't feel like I was laughing at you or anything. It was more of
Oh,
just a reaction of like, I really like, obviously it happened. Not that I doubt you. But it's like I can't fucking believe that this dude or these dudes are in here doing these things to my friend and this great person who does not deserve this to be done to. Not that anybody deserves it to be done to,
yeah.
but I just wanted to clarify, make sure like I didn't I didn't
Well,
mess
I
you
didn't
up.
pick up on it. So, I mean, I'm just sort of like,
I didn't really notice, like, it was just kind of what I did. And then I was going back through a little bit and I'm like, man, like somebody might think I'm sitting here giggling about harassment and stuff. Like, it's not what I was trying to do.
no, no, I would never think that, but I didn't pick up on it.
Okay.
So,
So, I
yeah,
mean,
no
somebody
worries.
probably will, I'm sure, if anybody
Eh,
watches this. There'll be
whatever.
some comment of like, oh yeah, the dude just thinks it's funny when sexual harassment happens.
No, but apparently the military does,
Yeah, I guess so. That's um, not to like jump right into that kind of thing, but it's been my experience just in the couple of things that I've done here or there. Of like, I mean, obviously, I wasn't naive to the fact that it did happen, and I had experienced it when we were in primo and we were doing training. We had literally had one of our E7s who got removed from our deployment because he was talking to the junior enlisted women and stuff. So it's like I've seen stuff like that happen firsthand.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, obviously it does happen, but then I don't want to try to get a skewed perspective on things of like, oh man, this is all that ever happens. Because I've talked to a bunch of people now who have had experiences like that. And, it's one that I hope, like with policing, you don't hear about the 99% of decent cops out there who are just trying to do their job. You hear
Yeah.
about the small percentage of assholes who mess stuff up for everybody. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's like trying to maintain perspective on things.
Yeah. It's tough. And like I know at times, like some people will say to me like, "Oh, wow, I didn't realize like you went through all that sort of stuff because you're just such a happy person and, like so motivated and go-getter. And I'm like, well, yeah, but what's the other option?
Yeah.
For me, there wasn't another option. So like this shit happened and it sucked, but like, how can I use this now to, educate other people or, help other people in the future, that sort of thing. And I think that through like my collective experiences between, sexual harassment, like on the bad side of the stuff, right? Like sexual harassment, almost getting kicked out of the military, um, sexual harassment again, like
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And then, kind of coming down to the near ending of my career, I my second to last unit was good. It was a really tough job. I was a logistics officer for 140 plus people. Um, so super demanding because there was only six of us on active duty, and I was the only officer on active duty, and the rest of it was a reserve unit, which you know how all that goes, right?
Yeah.
Um, but we had several instances there. I was the HR person, I was the medical person, I was the admin person, I was the finance person. And then I was also the person that, everybody would come in, shut the door, and like tell me what was going on. And we had lots of things going on there. That it was really like the good old boys club alive and well. Kind of a huge disconnect between like what the admiral is saying up here of all of her priorities and things that she wants to do and how we're going to make the service better. And then like all the way down here, it's the mindsets of folks like, 20 years ago, like, no, you know, this, this is how we've always done it and this is how I'm going to do it. And, har, har, har,
Yeah.
I'm a man kind kind of mentality. Like not to be a man basher or anything, but like just that
Well,
like
being a man, I like to say I'm an asshole. Like, yeah, that's not you being a man. For me, the definition of being a man can be obviously many things, but it's like if that's the mentality, it's like that's not coming in being a man. Like, you can take
yeah.
that shit and kick rocks. That's you being an asshole. It's you being poor leadership. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, that's, that's all there is to it. Like maybe take that attitude and leave.
Yeah. Unfortunately though, like sometimes you have a collective group of those types of people that just
For sure.
want to cover for each other at different levels of the organization where, other folks get caught up in the wake of it,
Yeah,
um, and just become collateral damage. And some of those folks are really good people, hard workers that, would have stuck around in the service had it not been for um, people acting up, people acting stupid, people being mean, like people not following policy, all of those things.
yeah,
And it causes people to feel bullied and alienated and and in some cases suicidal.
for sure.
And that's not what we stand for.
Yeah,
Um, but it's still what happens despite all of the messaging. Um, and I know that piece of things has definitely, hit home for me, because we've lost a couple of people from our collective, raid army teams,
yeah,
since we've been back due to suicide, as well as a couple of other folks that I know. So, that kind of thing, I put my mama bear hat on and I'm like, you know, protective and don't want to see anybody get singled out or hurt, um but sometimes not everybody cares about that. So kind of going back to a comment I made previously, like if you're the one that cares too much or it matters too much to you, then other people will just pass it off and be like, meh, well maybe that's just your problem then.
yeah,
um and that has happened, often, not just with me but with other people throughout the service as I talk to folks, that were going through medical boards, folks that were struggling with mental health issues for a variety of reasons. Um, once they asked for help or needed medical attention or did any of those things, we're supposed to support these people, and instead we kind of, looked at them with this label now that you're less than.
Yeah.
And then it just, perpetuated, bullying, perpetuated alienation, harassment, all of those sorts of things that, really can, and I've seen break good people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the other interviews that I just did recently in the army, we had ACE. It was ask, care, and escort. And it was
Yeah,
supposed to be, like ask your buddy, care for your buddy, escort your buddy to get help. And he got ask, not care, and escorted out of the building. Like,
yeah,
it was a complete opposite experience, like you said. He told someone what was going on, and it was like, okay, well now we're going to shuffle you away instead of helping you.
yeah,
That really sucks.
yeah. And I experienced it like with a couple of folks that I worked with, and I had every but sir and but ma'am, trying to like getting the member, like I got the member care that they needed, but then like trying to rectify the real root of the problem or issues. And it was just kind of like, this person said it's fine. And this person said, this person's overreacting. And, we don't really want to do anything to hurt this guy's record, and this and that. So, I had taken my butt sirs and butt ma'ams at one point, um, all the way up to uh, he was soon to be the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard. Um, and at the time, he was a gold badge, an area gold badge, and said, "Hey, like this is the stuff that's going on here. Like there's bigger issues." And he was like, "No, I talked to the folks over there, and they said that it's okay. So you just need to, suck it up and deal with it. And if they want to leave the service, then see you later."
No,
I was like, "Holy shit, like you're supposed to be, or like you were already, everybody knew that you were going to be like the next Master Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, and like this is the advice that you're given for your junior enlisted members. Like, fuck them."
no,
So, yeah, that like I think some of those situations collectively towards the end of my career really started weighing on me a bit. Just because my energy was so low, trying to uh like go through my own diagnosis process and figure out what's wrong with me, and then finding out that I had Parkinson's, and then finding out that maybe it's not Parkinson's. And it's like, hey, you have this thing, but you're going to live for 20 years and it's going to suck, or you're going to have this thing and you might die in 5 years. And then this roller coaster ride for like going on 5 years now, back and forth of like what this is.
can only
So
imagine the
juggling that,
emotions.
yeah, it's a super crazy emotion. So like dealing with that and then trying to, do my job and help other people is definitely tough. And I think the whole like PTSD aspect of stuff, from everything that happened in Afghanistan with that guy, um, it kind of comes out in unsuspecting ways sometimes. And I don't know if you've ever had experiences
Oh,
like
yeah,
this.
yeah, for sure.
So I remember like, like going to bat for a couple of my folks and like just getting beat down and like having that I'm trying to think of the right words here, like having somebody in authority that's supposed to be looking out for and protecting these people, like just kind of blowing it off,
Yeah,
you know, brought back all of, you know, other issues. And I was like, man, like, what the fuck are we doing here? Um, so those kinds of things were tough. And like, I think, I ended up crying a lot more than maybe I would have liked to, but
yeah.
you know, um, but it's emotional. Like you talk about people's health and well-being and like their careers and their uh financial financial means and all of that stuff and how it's going to affect their families. Like that's not something that you can just cast aside and like, meh, whatever.
Yeah, no, I should take some care and I
Yeah.
totally get what you mean. A couple years back, we had our house broken into and we were in the middle of a move, and I realized over the course of the next few months, like in hindsight, that like when we'd be out in public and someone would do something like cut in line, or I was being like a real a-hole and be like, no, like you cannot do that, and one guy was driving down, we were trying to leave somewhere, and he comes down the wrong way, uh, like towards us, and I just kept coming at him and slowly forced this dude to back all the way back out of this lane and go out because it's like, no, I'm going the right way down the lane. The arrow's my way. And I mean, like looking back, yeah, I was totally being a dick about stuff. But I'm sure it was because of since my house got broken into and, something subconsciously was like, I have been violated in this way. Someone has gotten into my personal space and did something wrong and illegal to me, and you're not going to go around. You're going to do what's right. God damn it, like so. Not saying that it's okay that I did that, but I
Yeah.
understand the whole like it manifesting in
Yeah.
ways you don't realize. You're even doing after the
Yeah.
fact, for sure.
I had a I had a one of the therapists that I was seeing at Fort Eustis, the Army base before I got off active duty. They were amazing there. But I remember like talking a lot about this sort of stuff and she would tell me she's like, you have a very well developed or overdeveloped sense of justice. Like this, right and wrong. And I'm
Yeah.
like, is that a bad thing? Like I don't know. I don't know that it necessarily is, but to the extent of like I feel like people should do the right thing and people do not inherently always do the right thing,
Yeah.
that it causes me more uh, you know, anxiety or distress.
Yeah. I guess it's about balance. I mean, it's a big reason why I got out because I was so tired of like getting in trouble for doing the right thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
like we had when I first got to my unit in Georgia, we had guys there who had really old, ratty looking uniforms. And I was like, wow, like, why don't you guys DX those things, like exchange them out for them? They're like, oh, we tried and we couldn't. And they told us what I'm like, that's bullshit. Like, let me look up the regulation, but I'm like 99% sure it's like every year, every 2 years, you can trade in old ones and get new ones, even in the reserves. Let me go look that up. So I look it up and I take it to the supply sergeant. I'm like, yo, what's the deal? Like right here in black and white, it says these guys get new uniforms. And dude didn't want to do anything about it. So I went to his assistant behind his back and we just went ahead and did it. And then it
Yeah.
got kicked down from battalion that they weren't going to approve the money and stuff. And like, what the hell is this? Several months later, I'm getting in conflict with this guy all the time because the supply sergeant is not doing what he wants to do ever, you know. So several months later, we're out at a different training, and our not our battalion, but the battalion above them, Sergeant Major of the division, was meeting with everybody, and I'm like, "Yo, Sergeant Major, what's up with us not getting uniforms?" And he's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Well, this is the deal. This is what we tried to do," and they told us, and he's like, "That's bullshit. You let me make a phone call," and those dudes had uniforms the next drill.
Wow.
And it turns out that this is allegedly, I don't know what happened behind the scenes. That supply sergeant disappeared because the
Hmm.
rumor was he wasn't actually an E6, he was an E4 that had falsified paperwork and got somebody to sign off on it and was pretending to be a staff sergeant. Now, I can't prove that. That's what they
Hmm.
said.
Okay.
Allegedly, that's what happened. But what I do know is he went away, people's paperwork got done, people got uniforms, and I got in a lot of trouble. Oh, yeah. So yeah,
But
it
people
totally
but people
like
got uniforms.
yeah, they got their uniforms, so that's okay. I'll take the hit on that, but it does wear on you when
Yeah.
you're like I know that's what I'm there for as a sergeant, but it's like it's
Hmm.
not I'm not trying to, like make sure these guys are getting to chow on time. It's like you are telling me they're not allowed to eat. and I'm having to fight you on that. Like, no, I'm pretty sure we're supposed to supply sustenance. Like, this is fucking dumb.
Yeah. It's
So,
some of those little things, man, but they do. Like, I know recently, I've had the conversation, with my wife and some other people, like, because for the last year now, as I was transitioning off of active duty, I did everything right the way I was supposed to do it. Found out I was getting medical boarded, went through that whole process, going through my doctor's appointments. Once uh, I had looked up some regulations, like knowing that my career was going to be ending a lot earlier than I anticipated. I think if it hadn't been for this and it hadn't been for some issues I experienced on my way out the door, I maybe would have been able you know, to do something else or do something more. Um, but I said, I was like, I've always been a fighter. I've always been strong. I've always, advocated for others. I enjoy advocating. But right now, like, I'm just so tired of fighting. Like I was fighting for a family member who was going through some stuff, some mental health stuff, and ended up leaving the Coast Guard. I was fighting for my own career, and then I was fighting the medical board because they initially came back at me with 30% for all my stuff, and basically they didn't even read anything is what
yeah,
it came down to, nor did they even read the regulation correctly because 30% is the minimum we would rate somebody at for Parkinson's. So and they didn't look at anything else. I had to go back to my medical board and like put together all of my combat stuff, like, hey, this is what I experienced, this is what I was exposed to. But the people at our headquarters level, kind of going back to our earlier part of the conversation, because the Coast Guard is so small and because we had such a minute footprint overseas, that so many people don't even know that that mission existed. I could remember being in the elevator at our headquarters building when I was stationed there for 3 years, and being in my traps with my little ribbons, and sitting in there or riding in there with seeing a bunch of admirals and captains and looking over at me, and they're like, "Oh, you're prior army," and I'm like, "No." They're like, "You're not? You, that that's Afghanistan, right?"
that's a that's a
Yeah.
that's a global war on terror medal there, right? Like,
Yeah, that is. Is that an army ribbon too? Yes, yes it is. And then this like perplexing look, like, yes, I was over there with the Coast Guard embedded in an army unit, and they're like, holy shit, I didn't know any of this existed. I'm
yeah.
like, probably be a good thing to know,
Well, and then
Admiral.
I'm sure with your paperwork, you submit stuff and you get some person behind a desk who's reading that and they're like, "What? This person went to Afghanistan? That never happened to the Coast Guard." Obviously, they're lying. Like, we're
Yeah.
just not let me look it up and double check or make sure or do my job. I'll
Yep.
just take my assumption and be like, "Oh no, not approved." Bump stamp.
Oh yeah. And I'm pretty sure like that's what somebody is doing right now. So, I was saying about just being tired of fighting things. So, like doing that, fighting my medical board, like having to put all this paperwork and documentation together when like my brain is the one that's not working well.
Yeah,
So, things that would have taken me, maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes 6 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever, now takes me days and weeks because my ability to sit and concentrate and like put things together in my brain is a lot slower.
yeah,
And the more stressed out I get, the more my body just shuts down on me. And then when it gets to that point, it's not like I can, just fight through it. It like literally just shuts down. My voice shuts off, my speech, my ability to like move my body shuts down, and I just have to like wait it out.
yeah,
So it took forever and so much energy to do all of that, right? And when I resubmitted everything to my lawyer, that ended up being like 400 pages worth of stuff. Like the write-ups and then like all of the medical supporting documentation. And because it wasn't just like, hey, I went to, medical once or whatever. Like, no, like this is, 4 years in the process, and I've been seeing it at Duke and VCU and the Mayo Clinic and like all these places, right? And so I give her everything. She turns it into the medical board. And this was like on a Friday at 2 o'clock. I get the phone call that, hey, everything's turned in. So I think it was like Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock, she gets a phone call and is like, yeah, so the medical board, we don't have the paperwork yet, but I actually got a call from them, which is the first time ever in my, doing this that they've actually, like, board presidents called me and said that they're changing it to 100% and combat related. And I'm like, cool, that's awesome. Like, but it was like very like anticlimactic
Yeah.
because I had to put forth all of this energy and like to prove that I was sick and prove that I was in these places, like for a service that's supposed to be taking care of me when I'm sick. You know what I mean? And there's no way that they went through all of that and digested it to like come up with yeah, this is what it's going to be in Saturday, Sunday, Monday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's really like somebody like looked at it and was like, "Oh shit, that's a lot of paperwork. They must really think like that must be serious then. Okay, well, let's check this off."
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Like you just
You know?
you just even doing the effort, they're like, "Oh, they must not be lying, I'm sure." It's
Yeah.
so strange because I'm sure you've experienced this too, but just thinking back of how, and my entire life is like that. Like my paperwork always gets lost, and I always have to
Yep.
resubmit everything 10 times. But then you got, other dudes who are faking an injury every single week, and nothing ever happens to them. No one ever asks a question. They're just like, yeah, sure, go to sick call again. Oh, you have another profile again? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Like, and it's like, oh, I don't know if well, we've just written that dude off as being a piece of crap, so we don't care anymore. But, like, so, but you, like, you're good. So obviously, when something happened to you, you must be lying about it. Like, wait a
Yeah.
second, that doesn't make any sense.
How does that make any sense?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's crazy like how we the mentality there. And I thought like going through it and seeing it firsthand for, like the petty officers and folks that work with me. And I'm like, man, like, is it like this, just because they're junior or whatever the case is? But then, you know, when it comes to my turn, right, going through this, I figured, well, like I've had a pretty impeccable career up to that point, like a little bit of a unique career, I'd say. Definitely, um, like I always had really good OERs. I always had really good EERs. I networked really well. And it was just like within my community, I was known as like a go-to person to get things done or put people in touch with other people and policy and all that sort of stuff. So I was like, well, that's not going to happen to me, right? Because like
yeah.
I've done everything that I'm supposed to do. I was a good person. I was a good worker. Like that won't be my situation. And then I get to that point and I leave my really, tough unit, my logistics job in the natural course of my rotation. And I move over to a staff job that's closer to home, that will be a position that I can continue like my medical care and stuff like that, because that's kind of the priority of figuring out like what's going on with me and stuff.
Mhm.
Tell my unit coming in like, hey, this is what I got going on, like, this is the deal, blah blah blah, I'm going to do my best for you, yada yada. And they were like, okay, yeah, cool, we'll definitely work with you. So you're going to be the one working 12-hour shifts, and you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And that guy says that these things aren't his problem, so we're just going to let him leave at 2 o'clock every day.
Like I just told you, I can only focus for like 4 hours at a time,
Yeah.
and you want me to work 12-hour shifts.
Yeah, it was crazy. And like I fought through and fought through and fought through and like, but it got to the point where I was like, I was having near passing out episodes at work. I was losing my speech. I was not able to think on my feet. So I'd be in a room having to present for like my department
Hmm.
on a major operation that's going on and to, like the 3-star and 2-star admirals. And then I'd start getting all these other questions because I'm not really the one that probably should have been sitting in there. Um, and I couldn't, like, my brain couldn't shift to answer the questions quickly. And I would freeze up on the spot. And by that time of day, my speech would be slurred, it would be stammered. And then my right eye, like, pretty much completely closes like this by about the end of the day, every day now, and is like that every morning. So here I am, with my pirate eye walking into this thing,
Some a-holes
and they're
trying to
like,
say like,
what the hell is wrong with
yeah,
this
did you go
person,
go to happy hour on lunch?
Right? That's exactly how it sounds sometimes. But it was also embarrassing, like that's not the best version of myself that I want to put forward, but I didn't have an option.
Yeah.
And what I said I needed and what the doctor said I needed was just constantly pushed aside. And it finally like sort of came to a breaking point. I had gone out to the Mayo Clinic and uh to get some testing and stuff, kind of like a second opinion for Parkinson's before, my all my final paperwork. And they were like, yeah, so I'm not really sure that you have Parkinson's. We think that you might have, because of your atypical presentation, we think that you might have, one of these other things like PSP or MSA, which is multiple system atrophy, or progressive supranuclear palsy. Like there were a couple of other things that were like much more progressive neurodegenerative diseases. And then they wanted to do the rule outs, right? So you have these collective group of symptoms, and we want to make sure it's none of these other things that could be potentially causing it. So I went for all these tests and all of these exclusionary tests and autonomic function tests and all this stuff. And the Mayo Clinic was absolutely amazing. And my doctors in the Coast Guard were absolutely amazing to support me and what I needed for my health. Um, but I get back from that first trip and I'm like, holy shit, like this wasn't what I was expecting to hear. It wasn't what my wife was expecting to hear. Like I was super stressed out about it. I had traveled there by myself for that trip. And on the way home, my my flight had gotten delayed. I missed the next flight. That flight got delayed. And I ended up like having a medical emergency and passed out on the plane and couldn't like advocate or say what was going on. And my wife ended up coming and picking me up in baggage claim. They like left me down there, like strapped to a chair with my bags next to me at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I go into the office like, I don't know, that was probably like Monday, right? That was probably like Friday or Saturday or something. And like I tell my boss, I'm like, hey, like this is what's going on. Like I'm super scared, blah 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 blah. I was like, I'm gonna have to go back again and have this other testing. And I knew that was already going to be a sore spot because he's like, well, we'll let you go, but you're only going to go this one time, and we're only going to pay for you to go this one time. And I'm like, well, okay, but I'm pretty sure that's not how the policy works. And he's like,
Yeah.
well, this is what the captain said. So, okay, captain, you're gonna, you know, why don't you tell the Mayo Clinic doctors that, this is all that they can do, like
Yeah.
it's just not even, and this guy was in charge of like, we were the like HR, like admin for the entire area
Yeah.
command. Like, really? This is how we're going to do? But I was just like, I was so upset. I was so stressed out about everything. And like, I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to live or die or what the case is going to be. And like, I'm dealing with this. My boss was just like, hey, okay, yes, send me an email. I need this analysis of this and these cost estimates. And can you have it to me in 20 minutes? And I'm like,
Not possible.
no, I can't. So like it like went from like bad to worse quickly.
Yeah,
And I think that under different leadership or this leadership like actually giving a fuck, that my experience would have been much different. But like within a few months I was suddenly like, this shit bag.
yeah.
Where my boss and my boss's boss were, walking around openly in the office talking about how I'm faking this. Cool story, bro.
And it's
Um,
well, it's incredible because like having been leadership in the military, and this so like to make it on a slightly simpler level, like if someone has a medical profile that says they're not supposed to be running because they have a twisted ankle, and they say, oh, you always got to have it on you, because if someone comes and asks you about it, like that is fucking dumb. Like, so me as a sergeant, if I go to somebody and go like, hey, why aren't you running? And they go, oh, well, I have profile sergeant. I'm like, oh, what do you have it on you? And just to let me see it, and then that way I can know. But
yeah,
if they say like, no, it's not on me, I'd be like, all right, well, take it easy today, and I'll catch up with you later. And then I'll go take my leadership ass into the
yeah,
office where there's supposed to be copies of the profile, or I can get a hold of sick call or whatever and confirm if they have a profile or not. And
yeah,
then I can come back to this soldier and be like, yo, found out you do or do not have profile, let me handle appropriately, not
yeah,
be a piece of crap in the moment. Like
yeah,
sure they might be doing wrong. That's not how you handle situations, and
yeah.
especially in your situation, that's just like 10 times worse. I mean, I'm gonna get hot. Like if I were there, I'd probably punch your captain.
It was like, and I just didn't have like, I was running out of the energy to fight this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
You
I
should have called me,
just,
man. I'd have jumped on a plane. I'd have kicked indoors. I don't give a crap. I'd be like, I'm a civilian now. What are you gonna do, bitch?
well, I fought to like stick up for myself on the phone the one day because we were like, after I initially came back and said, hey, this is what's going on. I got to go back and have this testing done like next week. So I need to turn this paperwork back around again. And I had gone to the policy people wherever I had to go to make sure, like, hey, like, yes, your unit has to pay, and this is how it has to go, and blah, 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 blah. And they're like, no, we don't believe that. No, we're not going to do that. Like, no, but this is what they said has to happen. Well, now I have to wait for you to call that person and verify and do it. Okay, that's fine. But
Yeah,
like, either way, I still have to go.
yeah,
And it was kind of like, well, you'll go if we like say you're allowed to go, kind of a deal. So so it was like it was down to like the Wednesday or Thursday before I had to travel. And like my wife was going with me now because I can't be left alone to travel.
yeah,
And they're like, oh, we don't have to pay for this too, like all pissy about it. And they still wouldn't sign my travel documents. So I could like make my airline reservation that I had to leave in 2 days, and my wife had to, request off of work and like all of these things. And it was just like, well, why can't you do this here? And why can't this? And like because I've exhausted the resources that I have in this area, like this isn't my first rodeo with this.
yeah,
Anyway, so like it ended up being this back and forth and back and forth. And I was like, I stuck up for myself and I was like, I just need to know, like, are you guys going to sign this or aren't you? Well, it was like, it was this crazy bullshit. Like so I was a lieutenant at the time. There was another lieutenant in the office. He was a male. And, they, so my boss would tell him to call me to tell me to call the boss. Right. So
what?
I'm like, all right, well, this is stupid, but okay.
Yeah,
So then I do that, and he's like, oh no, well, I don't want to talk to you now about it. I'll like call me tonight. And I'm like, why did you just do all this?
yeah,
So then I was like, well, no, I need to know now. Like I don't need to know tonight because I need to make these, travel plans or whatever. And he's like, I told you you should call me tonight. And I was like, sir, I need to know now. Like, what's going on? Don't you raise your voice at me and like I'm trying. He's like, you know how excitable you can get. You're just being excitable right now. And I was like, oh, now I'm really pissed.
You haven't seen Excitable yet.
Yeah. And I'm like, you know, I'm having this conversation on the phone, and my mother-in-law's sitting here, and I'm just like crying because I'm like, I don't understand. Like, you're fighting me to go get this test that's going to tell me whether I'm going to potentially have a much shortened life. Like, how does this make any sense?
Yeah.
So I ended up like having to go through my deputy and like get paperwork signed, and we were finally like left and went on the trip. And like, but it was just so like, it was so much of that for like the next couple of months, like back and forth. Um, and after that whole shenanigans, like I had to go into the office and apologize because that's apparently the worst that anybody's ever treated him in his whole entire career, which I find hard to believe since he like, you know, would openly, you know, F-bomb this and F-bomb that and F-bomb everything that came that was you know, sort of like leadership diversity, you know, whatever. Like just suck it up, sailor, and do your fucking job. Don't be a crybaby.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. It was just it got like really shitty, and like I got really shitty as far as feeling like super depressed, super anxious. Like I did not even want to go into the office when I had to like sign paperwork. I had such anxiety about even going in there, and like that, I mean, that's not typically me, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and at one point I was just like, well, what the fuck am I fighting all this for? You know, like I'm fighting my command, I'm fighting this disease, whatever it is, I'm fighting my, you know, the medical board people, and then I'm starting my VA claim, and I'm fighting Social Security disability all at the same time. And I'm like, I'm fucking exhausted.
I can
Like,
imagine.
who's fighting for me?
Yeah.
You know? So, like the last 2 years have definitely been rough because of all of that. I feel like we're now finally like coming out on the other side, you know, leaving and retiring it was best for my health, I believe. In comparison to like the work that I was doing or could have done with a supportive command and the appropriate medical care, I think probably still maybe would have been better than half of the shit bags that I worked with, you know, that like, we're just gonna, whatever, we're just not gonna not bother with them. So we just won't give them any more work, you know, and, but they'll continue to get promoted and whatever else. And, you know, but you have a different standard.
Yeah.
Um, so it got tough. Like, there's no two ways around it. And this community that I thought I was a part of, the service that I loved, that I was a part of, I suddenly felt alienated. I felt like the outsider, like the outcast. And I was surprised that that is what happened to me. And that was my experience.
Well, I'm sorry that it went that way, and you definitely don't deserve it.
And for some reason, like that, probably because it's still fresh, you know, like I had to take a break from Facebook and stuff for a while because, you know, most of my friends are all my military people, right? And I just couldn't, like, I needed to kind of cut ties and like give myself some time to see this whole like life that's gone on without me. Sorry.
It's all right. If you need a minute,
I think one of the positive things that happened during that time period though was that um I got involved with a really great Parkinson's organization called the Davis Phinney Foundation, and they are all about living well with Parkinson's.
mhm.
It's where I found most like educational and research and resources out, because your doctors really don't give you a lot of that. Um, And then, and I got a really good mentor through there. My friend Amy. Hi, Amy, if you watch this at some point in time. She has been amazing, an amazing friend and mentor to me for the last couple of years now. And she brought me into the fold, and that, that was awesome. It gave me something positive.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you found
Yeah.
some kind
And
of community that can
yeah.
help you out a little bit.
And and they do a bunch of webinars and stuff like that, and they have a young on-site group. And one of the monthly meetups that they were doing was like at one point in time was talking about, like finding a new purpose, after, if you have to, leave your job or, finding a new purpose in this new life that you have.
Hmm.
Um, and it definitely like, spoke to me. Like I'd watch like the monthly meetups and I'm like, oh, those are all my friends. And my wife just looks at me, she's like, do you know any of those people? I'm like, well, I talked to Amy. And she's like, well, they're not your friends if you don't know them, Jess. That's weird. Like you're being a weirdo. Stop being weird. And I'm like, I can't help it. I'm weird.
Why can't they be? It's not that they're not your friends. They're just not your friends yet. You have to go
Yeah,
talk to them.
exactly, right? But she like she's much more introverted than I am. So she's like, she
No.
describes me to people as like Buddy the Elf on crack as we walk around our neighborhood and stuff. And and then but that was really good. I got into doing some cycling on my good days, and that's been really good for me. And then I also got connected with the Michael J. Fox Foundation
Hmm.
and their advocacy program. And there was some legislation in DC for the National Plan to End Parkinson's, which
Hmm.
essentially it ended up getting passed and signed into law this summer, and it essentially is going to create a big committee, and it's going to
Okay.
be who's who from all of the agencies that have some sort of connection to Parkinson's relation, whether it's NIH, whether it's DOD, VA, public health, like all of these different entities, Social Security, to, make a game plan and figure out like, how can we help these people? How can we promote research? How can we, find a cure for Parkinson's? How can we better support caregivers and people going through this? Like, what are
Yeah.
the needs? All of these things. So during 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 that, I had reached out to one of the folks um, that worked with the Michael J. Fox Foundation, on these legislative issues, and he would set up meetings with different officials like for
Hmm.
our areas. So I got to talk to folks from our congresswoman's office and the senator's offices, and basically like tell my story about Parkinson's and being an active duty military person and being a combat veteran and being a female and all of these different, little categories, um, and why this legislation is important. And I felt like, oh, okay. I feel like I might have a new purpose somewhere, I'm kind of crawling out of my hole and using my experiences once again, now out of the military, to to fight or advocate for a new group of people that I'm a part of.
Yeah.
So that's what I started doing, and that's what I'm gonna hope to continue doing, um, you know, as we go forward here in the next year or two or whatever.
Well, that's huge, and I hope things work out for you with that because that is definitely speaking to a friend of mine who was asking. He doesn't know much about the military in general, and that was one of the things he said is like he'd be really interested when I started doing this is finding out from those who not aren't necessarily in anymore, and what they do afterward. And a lot of, I would say probably most of people who come out of the military struggle with that. And then in your situation is unique because it's not just you retire from a job you did 20 years and now maybe let's see if I can learn to apply that, but then with all the extra layers of your diagnosis and learning to live with that and then finding that new purpose within it. And I honestly do really hope that you get to do that kind of stuff because I mean it sounds like it's going to be a great thing for you, and I'm happy that you can continue on and find that purpose.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I know a lot of people come up and ask me like, "Oh, well, you're getting out, what are you going to do next? Are you going to go work here or there?" I'm like I'm lucky if by 2 o'clock in the afternoon I remembered to brush my teeth for the day. Like, I don't know if that's something I want to be saying on video, but like that's a reality sometimes. Like, I used to commute an hour and a half each way to work, and work a 12-hour day, and now I can because so the connection between my brain and my eyes and my brain and my bladder, like all of the like autonomic type things, isn't working very well. So, I can only drive when my vision is good.
Hmm.
And I can't drive more than 15 minutes from the house because sometimes I'll get somewhere and then something will happen and my symptoms will kick up and then I can't get home.
Yeah.
Um, so my wife has frequently had to, leave her work day and leave school and come pick me up wherever I've gotten myself stuck, whether it's on the side of the highway or whether it's, at a doctor's office because I had a, near syncope episode or, wherever, which I know is, challenging in and of itself for her. And I'm not easily wrangled well. So,
Well, and a lot of people don't talk about the effects it has on the loved ones. Not, I mean, it gets talked about. We talk about military life and being away and, having to take care of the home and family back here and stuff. But then the aftermath, the signing on for when you are there and things aren't perfect. Things aren't going great. And there are times, especially where we being in the military, you get so used to just handling things
yeah,
and then not being able to just handle something or saying you need help with taking care of something. And that's tough for our loved ones too. So, I commend her and her bravery and strength in helping you. And I'm glad that you guys have that relationship that
yeah.
you
Well, and it's definitely tough on her, especially because, one of the um it, like all of this has really impacted like my cognitive abilities. I wouldn't be sitting here talking with you on this video if I was having a bad day.
yeah.
Which I know we've rescheduled lots of
Yeah.
times. So,
Yeah, well, between
um,
that and elder dogs and having a new baby and
yeah,
hurricanes and
all the things.
but
Um,
it's all right. We make it work.
But yeah, it really affects like my cognitive ability. So, I used to be the one that everybody would lean on, right? Like my family, I was a go-to person. My wife, I was a go-to person for her family. And, over the last couple of years now, like I struggle.
Hmm.
The reality of things is that I don't drive that much anymore. Um, I don't go a lot of places unattended because I might see something, but my body doesn't react in time.
Hmm.
So a lot of times I'll be like walking in the middle of the road or I'll cross when there's traffic coming because my brain didn't tell my body to stop yet. Um, or I will forget about things if I'm trying to do more than one thing at a time. And I've nearly set our house on fire a few times because I've left the stove on and I've thrown a towel on there because I was drying my hands and I just threw it on the thing. Or I break dishes because I can't like hold it right and break it on the
Hmm.
counter. Or I actually did set the grill on fire once. Like, I'm now banned from getting on a ladder because my balance instability is so bad.
Yeah.
Um, Supervised like a three-step ladder. But, you know, funny story. I got myself on the railing on my front porch. I was trying to take down some lights. I'm like, oh, I'm having a good day. I can do this. Take down some Christmas lights or put them up or whatever. This was like a year or two ago, maybe 2 years ago, probably. And I slipped and I fell and I got my arm stuck in the flag holder and I was fell over the side of the rail with my arm like stuck up like this. And I was like, shit. And I'm looking around to see if any of my neighbors have seen me. And then I look and I'm like, oh, this is all on video from the doorbell camera, watching it on playback.
Well, I guess at
Like
least you
that's
have a good reason. I mean, me, I'm just stupid. I did it the other day. I left the stove on. I put a spice bottle right on top of it, melted the bottom, picked it up, spices went everywhere. So,
yep.
I'm just dumb.
Well, I don't know. Jen might agree with you and say that I'm just dumb in respect to then. I don't know.
No.
But and it's tough for her because like, now she's constantly picking up the slack for the things that I'm not doing or the things that I'm forgetting or I could juggle five, six, seven things in a day and now I'm like, I took the laundry out and I folded it and I walked the dogs and I have to, call Social Security back for the 400th time. And that's about all I can get accomplished in my day.
No.
Um, friends and family and other people are like, oh, why don't you just come out with us and go drinking and do this and do that? And like, or we cancel plans in the last minute because, I was getting stressed out about going somewhere and bending over to tie my shoes and I got dizzy and the next thing you know I'm on the floor for an hour because I can't get up because
No.
my blood pressure won't re-regulate. So earlier in the summer, Jen put together a post on Facebook and she had asked me because I had put a couple things on Facebook here and there, but not really like I didn't really talk about like what was going on.
Hmm.
I wasn't necessarily like keeping it to myself, but
You weren't
people that were close to
advertising
me
it.
knew, but didn't know.
No.
So I think she, kind of wanted people to understand like what it's really like.
Hmm.
Um, and from her perspective and from my perspective. Do you mind if I read it real quick?
Yeah, you do whatever you want to do.
All right. Jen, this is your voice. And she'll probably be like, why can't you remember things?
Now, if she gets mad at you about it, that's not on me. That's on you.
I know, I know. She'll be like, why did you read that thing instead of folding the laundry? Ah, shit. Don't be wasting time. Um, all right. So this is what she posted up there, and it kind of like sums up like what we've been going through. But she says, I know we don't know anyone an explanation, but I feel that this explanation could help others understand Jess's current mental, emotional, and physical status. Jess was medically retired from the Coast Guard. She didn't seek to retire. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't an option. She didn't volunteer to be retired. As we say in school, Jess was voluntold. So after almost 17 years, Jess was medically retired from the Coast Guard due to a diagnosis of young onset atypical Parkinson's with unspecified dementia. What does that mean? I'm so glad y'all asked. I stole this definition from the interwebs. Parkinsonism refers to a set of symptoms typically seen in Parkinson's disease, but caused by other disorders. Atypical Parkinsonism includes a variety of neurological disorders in which the patients have some clinical features of Parkinson's disease, but the symptoms are caused not only by cell loss in the substantia nigra, the brain area most affected by classic PD, but also by added degeneration of cells in the parts of the nervous system that normally contain dopamine receptors. In other words, the patients look like they have PD, but the cause of their symptoms is different from the classic PD. No site necessary because this is Facebook. Unspecified dementia. Well, that's just a fancy way to say dementia without a specific diagnosis. It's a for now thing. TBD at a later date, but it's there to make sure that her healthcare providers know to be on the lookout. Her really fancy Mayo Clinic doc left the door open for interpretation since he just doesn't know for certain that Jessica has PD or something more progressive than PD. So she's got those classic PD things going on: stiffness, involuntary movements, muscle rigidity, problems with coordination, rhythmic muscle contractions, slow movement, sleep disturbances, difficulty speaking and swallowing, confusion, difficulty thinking and understanding, fatigue, apathy, depression, neurogenic bladder, reduced facial expression, and etc. But also so much more. But throw on top of that symptoms of multiple system atrophy, dementia with Lewy bodies, autonomic dysfunction, ptosis, executive dysfunction, and an inability to regulate her body temperature. I cannot list all of the symptoms, but it's just so overwhelming. She was diagnosed at 39, and for a while she hid it really well. But hiding it got sort of old, like in our late teens and early 20s when we hid being gay. But being gay is cool now, and having some type of Parkinson's is just a mood killer. So this is where we stand. Jess has a degenerative brain disease that's been unspecified. She has really good days, which is today, and really bad days. Getting enough sleep, taking meds on time, timing meds before or after food, exercising, keeping stress low. Those all help, but they don't make it go away. Jess struggles to drive independently on some days. Sometimes her vision is so bad that she can't get somewhere. She can get somewhere, but it all goes to shit, and I leave work to pick her up. Sometimes her memory is so bad that she almost burns her house down. She forgets that we have 5 dogs and finds one locked outside. Sometimes she can't swallow so well and chokes. I could go on, but I think you get it. We take it day by day, but each day is its own struggle. Some days her meds are on point and Jess is able to independently get through her stuff without my help. Some days her meds don't do shit, and I miss work to ensure she can safely get to her frequent medical appointments or safely be at home. Jess is an extrovert and needs to socialize, but without the support, but without support, the only place she can do that is in our neighborhood or online with all of you guys. Jess wants to be out more, but she runs the risk of not being able to get home. She wants to be around friends, so come over or call or text her. This disease is isolating. It's scary. It's day by day. We don't want your pity, just your understanding. Whereas I would say, don't be a fucking dick. The end.
Well,
So,
I think that sums it up pretty well.
yeah. But despite all of that, I think that you know, everybody gets dealt some sort of hand, right? And it's a matter of what we do with it.
Hmm.
So, the things that we do, um, I like to serve others. Jen likes to serve others. She's been a special ed teacher for 21 years now.
Wow.
Constantly fighting her admin at various jobs, especially the one she's at now, because they don't respect or care about special education or that population of people. Um, but we find ways, in and out of a regular workday. We are passionate about um, are rescuing dogs, taking in special needs dogs or senior dogs and giving them homes and a chance to be loved before, their time is up.
Hmm.
Helping our neighbors, helping our friends, advocating for people with Parkinson's. And um, now I'll be also advocating with I've recently been in touch with our local Senate offices to help advocate for our wounded warrior military members, like myself, who had been, medically separated from the military or medically retired, or are currently going through that and are fighting with Social Security disability, because that is something that Social Security has an entire program for wounded warriors that
Hmm.
allows them to apply while they're still on active duty. But frequently they're denied because they're showing income. And it's really the folks that are processing the applications are uneducated, don't care, overwhelmed, um, that they just stamp a denied letter and move on. And now that affects that person by setting them back 6, 7, 8, 9 months
Hmm.
of income that their family would need to survive. Um, and I know that, I'm fighting this because I'm having to go through it, but also in talking with the Navy Wounded Warrior Program, and I know the Army and Marines and Air Force all has one within each service too that helps people process through the disability evaluation systems. They're the points of contact to like start the process and stuff and help through Social Security. And the folks that I worked with said that they were having problems getting any military members approved over the course of the last 6 months to a year.
Wow.
And that includes folks in over 20 states.
Wow.
So this is a systemic problem. And I think the policy is there. It might need some clarification, but there needs to be an awareness and training in how to process things. Um, because I feel like so many military members and veterans now have lost out on benefits or have gotten frustrated with the system because it takes so long, or, they deny you and they just don't have the mental or physical capacity to keep fighting it. That they, unfairly get denied benefits that they were entitled to.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that um, that we can work to maybe get a change in legislation or a change in policy and how they do business, and maybe even have them do a 10-year look back and look at all the cases that they erroneously denied. So
Really makes me wonder what that disconnect is because, well, like when we were speaking earlier, um, just about leadership and how things were going. During my time, it was this big reason why I ended up getting out because, like you, I mean, I just got tired of fighting for stuff. Um, but I like to say a lot of that was probably because of drawdowns. So just the entire mentality of everyone, like everybody was getting dumped on all the time. And so even the good ones weren't doing as well. I mean, I know I was not. I had periods where I was, failing PT tests and I wasn't keeping up with how I should have been. And I'm not trying to excuse myself, but a lot of that was, like I say, everybody was getting dumped on. Everybody was miserable. So I wonder if there's a certain amount of that within this in particular, because I know, you look all across the country and people are having a hard time with wages, and even when you offer more money, it's still not, fixing the problem. So is it wages? Is it training and education? Is it money? Is it amount of personnel? It's probably a combination of all these things, I'm sure.
I think so. Yeah.
But it really
And
sucks.
I think the big issue, like, that I'm finding out, like, there's supposed to be an expedited process
Hmm.
for, like, as you're going through your medical board, you can apply for these benefits, and the theory and the expectation is that when you get out of the service, right, you'll have whatever you get out of the service with, you'll have your VA disability and any Social Security benefits you're entitled to. And the three of those will make up your financial compensation from from the government. Like, hey, thank you for being less than the 1% that served our country. I'm sorry that we broke you. Here's some money.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not the case. Like, that 4 or 5 month process, whatever it is, like, for me has turned into 17 months now.
Yeah.
Um, and and me, like, having to once again, like, my brain is the one that's not working. Like, why am I having to tell you why you're not doing your job? You know? And then if I tell you that you're not doing your job, are you going to tell me that, like, I should be working because my brain is smarter than your brain right now because I give a fuck and you don't? Like, you know? And as I was, like, going through and doing some research, I found there was a government accountability report from 2009 that addressed this issue. Um, and it was like Congress had directed DOD, Social Security, and VA to like get together and figure out how they can best serve our veterans coming home. So you're
Hmm.
talking about 2009, we're still in the middle
Hmm.
of, combat operations, right? And
Well, I'm
we're
sure
not
that had to be
talking
right around the time they were making the decisions to
mhm,
eventually start to draw down because it
drawdown.
was a
Yep.
couple years later that was our job was to help send everybody home. So
So I mean, I think that this was done in expectation of those drawdowns, you know what I mean? And it
yeah.
addresses especially mental health issues and how it's difficult for service members to navigate benefits and how they're supposed to be, representatives within the services that help educate them on benefits and like doing like the Navy Wounded Warrior program, right? Like they're doing their jobs. But the system isn't helping. And I think a big piece of that, and like even talking with like, my therapist who has seen a lot of it and seen how this affects like lots of other people that she has served over the years. Like she's like, I remember all that. And like it went really good for like a year, they like took a couple of, like, hey, we did this really great thing for this '06 and this '05 and this like E4 and
Hmm.
like cool. And like now we're done. And then by 2010, 2011, it was like fallen by the wayside. And now 2024, half the people that were on the books at the time probably don't even work there anymore.
Yeah.
So you have a whole new group of people coming in that, unless they're going out of their way to research things, or the people above them are training them on how to process military, they just process it like civilian, and it's not. You know, our pay is based one on our like active duty time, and
Hmm.
then we have a housing allowance that doesn't even count towards our pay. And then it's not a 40-hour work week for us. Like our pay is based on 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and that's
Yeah.
non-negotiable. So when you break that down, it equates to at or below minimum wage per hour when you do all the math on it.
Yeah.
And then like in addition to all of that, when they have to like figure out, oh, well, you make too much money or you make too less money, um, once you go into a medical status, you're not doing your job anymore. So then that's a whole different criteria for military members that are going in a that are in a medical status, but they're still getting paid. And they're like, that's not supposed to count, and all these other things. And like, you know, I might forget to leave the stove on, or, I might forget our dogs, or I might fall off the railing of my front porch and get stuck in the flag holder. But, after 20 years of reading federal code, I can tell you, like, I know how to read a code of federal regulations really well.
Yeah.
So, so I let them know that. And I don't think that they appreciated that very much, but, um,
No one
but
likes getting told they're not doing their job, even when they're obviously not doing it.
so, and even like there was I got in touch with like a regional person in Philly that's like a military outreach or something like that. And,
Hmm.
he's like, yeah, this is a problem. And I'm like, okay, like, well, what are we doing to fix it? Oh, like, oh, I'm not in charge of those people. Like, I just help reach out and make a phone call and be like, hey, where's their application status? Like,
Yeah.
so I mean, I think we need to do better. I think we need to, you talk about less than 1% of the population serves in the military. How many of that population is now, then going through this wounded warrior process to apply for Social Security disability, like they should have a separate, and I know it's money, right? It's staffing, it's um more applications than I'm sure they're able to process, but like there should be a central military processing point, whether it's at their headquarters level or whatever, and everything gets funneled up through them to like a staff of, you know, however many that know and are familiar with this that can do right by our veterans and not force them to be in really difficult financial positions. just because you have one person who is like, nah,
Yeah,
and can easily stamp denied, and then it sets that person back so much longer. Like, that's not fair.
I
So
agree.
I'm hoping that maybe something will change in the future. That also might just be me being, hopeful and optimistic, which,
Well, I mean, if there's anything to be said about humans, what's that saying of like you can take everything away from them, but you can never take away the hope and stuff. It's like we are eternally hopeful, but it 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 takes that. Like that could be the catalyst of that
yeah,
you could be that person because they're like you say, there's a lot of people who aren't. They get frustrated, they give up, they're not doing it, and it's not fair to ask you to do that. It's not fair at all. But, if you're the one that gets it done, then that's an amazing thing. And it stems from that hope. Maybe if somebody hears this, they'll help out or give another phone call, another person to help reach out to.
maybe.
But
Well,
I'll,
and I think it'd be nice, like, if somebody does listen to this and, is in a situation or, had been or knows somebody else, like, you know, reach out, you
yeah.
know, so reach out to one of us or, I'm hoping that like as you do these podcasts and stuff, we hit on topics that are, you know, important to people or, they get a chance to hear like, you know, maybe it's an E4 that's going through some shit and they listen to this and are like, oh, it's not just me. Like this has happened to other people. Cause I think people have a tendency to, I've done it at times too, that like you, especially when you shrink down, and you feel like your world has gotten smaller and things have gotten tougher around you, that like you're the only one that's going through something like this. And you're not, and stuff happens at all levels and ranks and job types and all of that. And, it's a matter of like having a network and knowing that there's other people out there that you can go to talk to because you're not alone. Um, and, community is big and you might not have the community anymore in the place that you're at, but, you will have a new community. And if somebody needs it, then we can be their community.
Well, I'll do my best to get it out there and try to get in front of people and then see
Well, I have faith and confidence in you, Alex.
well, I appreciate but I mean, I completely agree. Just in having done a few of these now, and I'm working on trying to get them edited and get them up and stuff. I'm hoping within another week or so, maybe two, that I'll start putting stuff online. Um, but yeah, I mean, I've had a couple of people on so far where it's like things have gotten heavy, man. But people need to know about it. People need to know this
Yeah.
stuff happens.
I feel like we did talk about heavy stuff, but like there was lots of positive things too. And I feel
Well,
like I didn't talk about all those.
I
So
would I would like for people to take away that as well. And like you said, that like if stuff bad things, probably will happen. Not that they might or but it's like bad stuff probably will, and it all depends on you and how you want to take that and handle it. You can let it crumple you up and destroy you and never do anything about it, or you can learn to effective ways to deal with what you got going on and move forward. And I think you're a fantastic example of someone who's had maybe a few extra difficulties thrown her way, but I think you're a good example of what you can still do even when these things happen to you. Um, and something you had touched on a couple of times in I know it's a a big thing. It might not be quite so big nowadays where you're like it's cool to be gay. I've often wondered that too, because I mean like because my personal yeah, I mean, gay is fine. I don't care. Whatever. People are people. They do what they want to. I mean, like, who am I to judge someone for being gay? But when I joined the army, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell was still in place. And I remember when it got repealed, and I knew a few gay people in the army. Um, and I think you had told us after a while when we were overseas, or it came up in conversation or something.
yeah.
You speak about it naturally, which is great. But it makes me wonder that because I'm sure there are people in the military right now who are still struggling with being gay in the military. And I know being trans in the military it's a big hot
Hmm.
topic right now and stuff. And it's I mean as much as I would love to say and side with one or the other and just be like, oh, you just do it this way. Like it's not a uncomplicated situation in trying to how to, you know, weave through it all. And I wish anyone the best if they are that and going through that. So like in your situation, you had your difficulties, I'm sure, with being gay in the military as well. Um, how does that, you know, wrap into all this at all? Do you think it changed your experience very much or not at all? Or,
Um, I mean, I'm sure that it definitely impacted my experiences, like if I wasn't gay, um, I probably wouldn't have been almost kicked out of my co out of the Coast Guard, way back when. I would
mhm,
have been like, you know, probably like, hey, good job on, reporting this and doing this and doing this. Like, you know what I mean? Like instead of a pat on the back, I got a, smack in the head.
mhm,
Um, so I mean that's a piece of things, right? And I think like even even in some conversations, like, I would take my wife with me to like the Coast Guard ball and things like that. And it was we would sit down at a table and talk like it was, like it was normal. But then
mhm.
there are still people out there that are just kind of like, oh, you know,
Yeah.
you're gay or, you're less than. You're weird, you're different, you're whatever. And there's definitely very strong religious opinions on things,
Mhm,
and personal opinions that, when it comes to the military, like you're there to work, right? Just like, so I remember this isn't gay, but it touches on the woman thing. So I was in Bahrain and I had gone from Afghanistan to Bahrain to do my interview for my officer package.
mhm,
Me and my E6 at the time had gone down there and I'm sitting before this panel of officers that are interviewing me and regular active duty folks. I was, reservist on active duty at the time. And this one guy, he was like, I don't know, 21 or 20, like 22 or 23, or whatever, something like that. Young guy. And we had to write like an essay of, why we wanted to be an officer or whatever. And, one of my like sayings that I've always, put out there was like, be the change you want to see in the world. Like
mhm.
change happens with you. And I had put that in there and he was like knocking me down in my interview, like how do you expect as a ensign to affect any change, blah 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 blah. And I was like, I mean, I'm not like figuring out a policy for world peace in my first year. Maybe that'll be in the second year. But maybe it's the difference on how you talk to somebody in a day. Like we
Yeah.
don't know what they're going through. Maybe it's taking the extra time. Maybe it's helping somebody get to where they need to be, or, benefits or education or putting food on their table, or, just having somebody to talk to. Like it doesn't change can be the smallest thing. It could be smiling at a person during the day. Like you never know how something that you do is going to impact somebody else.
Mhm.
So why not use the powers for good instead of evil? And the guy just looked at me like I was like off my rocker. There is no way this chick is going to be an officer in the Coast Guard. She might as well be smoking weed and hugging trees because no way. So then, like, I gave that response back, and he's like, like literally sitting back in his chair, like, ha ha ha, see how you answer this one. And then the other, like, commander and lieutenant that was on the panel, they're all like, oh, yeah, like, that makes sense. Okay. So it gets like to another part in it or whatever, and he's like, oh, well, how do you expect for people to take you seriously in the wardroom as a female? And I was like, oh, okay. So we're going to have this question. All right. And I said, The same 23-year-old, by the way. And I said, well, honestly, sir, I expect that people will take my ideas seriously based on my ideas and not the genitalia I have in my pants.
Hmm.
It was like, that isn't that the question you asked me? Just because I'm a
Seems,
woman, people aren't going to take me seriously?
yeah, seems pretty simple.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I think the same thing rings true for like, for being gay. Like, it all depends on who your audience is. Like, you might get an audience that's completely receptive, or you might get somebody that will treat you on the line of in policy or just outside of policy, um, because they can,
Yeah.
or because they don't like what your family situation is, or whatever the case may be. Um, and we've experienced that too. Like that, I experienced that on the gay side a little bit, when I was at headquarters. I know another, um, and by another female, and then one of the other females that we worked with, she experienced it by the same person for having a family,
Hmm.
being told that like you can't have a family and have a career. So like pick what you want to do. Like I'm pretty sure that's also not the message that we're sending out right now,
Yeah.
because there was this whole like women's retention study that was done by the Rand Corporation, trying to find out why women are leaving service, like, and how we can better like recruit and incentivize people to stay in mid-career.
Hmm.
Well, we're not, or they're not, because of situations like this.
Yeah.
And that right there is how much change is affected by person to person.
Well, even just a small tweak in the phrase, like you say, "Oh, you can't have a family and be a career person," in the or maybe just saying like, "Listen, you can do that, but just understand it's not easy
Yeah,
to balance a family and career." Like, yeah, do that. You want to do that? Sure. You want to do one or the other? Sure. It's your choice. Understand there's a reality to it. I mean,
yeah.
sure, that's fine too, but don't be a dick about it. It reminds me like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Goes back to my new phrase, don't be a dick.
Yeah. Well, I was in Fort Stewart and I was there because I was injured. They have the warrior transition units. It's like physical therapy and such. So I'm walking around the track with some of the other folks there who had gotten hurt and we're discussing different stuff. And then the topic of, gay people just come, I don't remember why. But the guy, he was like, yeah, those F words, they shouldn't be in the military, this, that, whatever, blah, blah. And I just simply asked him, I was like, listen, I'm not going to try to argue whatever reason you have for not, agreeing with homosexuals, because it's like you're allowed to do that, you whatever. But why do you have to use the F word instead of just saying, I don't agree with homosexuality, I don't believe in gay or whatever. So why do you have to demean them? And he was like, "Oh, you know what? You're right. I shouldn't do that." No, you know what? F those F words. Like, what just happened, man? Like, like, I
Yeah,
didn't try to change your mind or anything. I just simply asked, like, why you got to be a dick? And he's like, "You're right. I'm being a dick. Fuck that. I'm gonna be a dick." Like
yeah,
what? What? Why?
yeah. Because I can.
Yeah, I don't. It's incredible.
We had and Thunder will tell this story better, but he was in the office with one of our other guys, this guy Eric at the time, and Eric is very black and white,
Hmm.
and Thunder always enjoyed messing with him, right? So Eric is like reading, I don't know, whatever it was, Military Times or whatever the magazine we got over there was, right? And he's like, I can't believe they're gonna let gays be in the military. And Thunder's like, in true Thunder fashion, right? Like, well, why not? They're all in here already. And Eric's like, oh, can you believe that? Do you think they're here? Like, oh my God, are aliens coming?
Are
The
they around us? Are
gays
they in the room with us right now?
are here. And he's like, well, how would you feel if you were in the shower with one? And Thunder's like, well. honestly, I'd feel pretty flattered if a gay man was looking at me. That means I have a pretty good damn body.
Yeah, sounds about like thunder.
So he like took it and spun it in a fun way, but like this guy was like hard on, like, I can't believe this,
Yeah.
you know?
When I was in high school, it was a much bigger deal, especially growing up in the South. And it's not that they weren't reasonable people, but there were some that just, be it the way they were raised or whatever. Some people were just unreasonable about it. And I used to have long hair and a paint on my fingernails and stuff like that. I had a guy walk by me in the hallway one time and he bumped into me and he's like, what are you, some kind of F? And I was like, yeah, and I'll fuck you in the butt too. What? And he just ghostly white stares at me, turns around and walks away. He just, not what he expected the reaction to be. So yeah, I
Good for you, caught him off guard.
I kind of it makes me just wish like it makes me wonder if Dan and I had spent more time together, just the kind of ridiculous crap we would get.
Oh God. Well, I'm sure if we do some more reunions or something like that, there'll be plenty of opportunities for shenanigans.
I would love to. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like even now, like so, I mean, that sort of thing runs true in the military and out of the military. Like 2 years ago, my wife went through it
Hmm.
at school. She was being discriminated against by another teacher for being gay. Nothing to do with the job she was doing or how she was taking care of her special education kids.
Hmm.
It was that this woman just didn't like her. So anything that she said, this woman wasn't going to do.
Yeah.
And the doing was affecting the children and what they were entitled to and what they needed. And it was brushed under the rug for almost a year. Like she had
Wow.
gone to her principal, she had gone to, other teachers, like, hey, I think this is going on. Like, I don't understand. Like, this woman was outwardly saying stuff, and like they were all of similar mindsets that, like, oh, let's just, push this under the rug. And it really, like, she's a pretty strong person and like doesn't usually give a fuck what you think about her. But it really started to bother her because it was affecting the kids.
Yeah. Well.
So it finally came to a head, and like she went and filed a discrimination complaint, right? Down at the whatever office, admin office. And I go down there with her to like be a witness. And they didn't want to let me in the room at first. They're like, oh, well, we need advance notice if somebody is coming. And she was like, no, this is my wife and she's coming.
Yeah.
And we go in there, and like, her religious preferences were all over her office.
Hmm.
So we're having this conversation, and like you could just see like how awkward she felt about having to take this report because she didn't feel similarly
Yeah.
in a positive way. And the long and short of it was the investigation was half-assed, and they ended up turning around and saying like, hey, this didn't really happen. This other person, you know, misinterpreted what was going on, and nothing bad happened to you and whatever. Like it's all in your head kind of a thing. And like that was super shitty.
Yeah.
And that person didn't come back into her school again the next year, but like, nobody had her back. She was just on her own dealing with it and still fighting, advocating for her group of people against the system that was fighting against her. And you know, it felt really weird to be going through something like that with her, almost 20 years after I had gone through stuff. Like,
Hmm.
you know, really, this is what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Um, but it's true. And being in a more southern area, um, definitely has different mentalities than, where I grew up in the north.
Hmm.
So, so it's definitely something that, while being gay is cool because we're gay and we're cool, and it's, second nature now. I mean, Jen and I have both probably been out for over 20 years now.
Yeah.
We've been married almost 10 years, which is really strange because that's like a long time. It's the most amount of commitment I've ever had next to the Coast Guard. Um, that like there's still things that come up that like will stop us in our boots, like, you know, wow, this
Yeah.
is not everybody is okay with this.
Yeah. I
Um,
like how particularly you chose to say boots and not as if you don't want to personify, the lesbian stereotype thing.
well, speaking of lesbian stereotypes, so probably inappropriate comments, but when I was leaving my headquarters job and moving back down to the Hampton Roads area to take that logistics job, my boss at the time was signing off on my like my PCS check sheet, like, oh, here's who's moving with you and here's your vehicles. And he's like, really? Your wife and your two Subarus and your rescue dogs? Could you be more stereotypical lesbian? And I'm like, I feel like you probably can't say that, but it's hilarious. Yes,
Yeah. I mean,
I am.
I guess it all depends on how you take it and receive it. And not to say that. So I was thinking that earlier when you were talking about going to the military balls, like there's a big difference if someone walked up and goes like, "Oh, I didn't know you were gay," or just like, "Hi, nice to meet your wife." It's
Yeah,
it's not that one person is meaning it insultingly or whatever, but it can vary a lot on how you choose to perceive that. And I'm sure
yeah,
there are a lot of people that are just, ignorant in the definition of ignorance, not they're bad people,
yeah,
or and then they just don't really know. So, try not to take them as everyone is attacking you, you know. And if someone is, I mean, obviously that's not right, but obviously you're pretty easygoing about stuff, so that makes life a little easier in times, I'm sure.
generally. I can take a lot. But then when I can't take a lot, then I'm done. Then
Yeah.
like there's no in between at that point. Like you have reached my meter of bullshittiness and I am done with your bullshittiness
Yeah.
and now I will be a dick.
Well, I think a lot of it, like I say, just comes down to being reasonable with people. I mean, like I have relatives that, they don't believe gay is a real thing, but you would never know that they felt that way because they would not treat you any differently than anyone else. Like they're
Yeah.
great, very kind and polite people, and you would be welcomed in like everyone else. It didn't matter, they just kind of feel a little bit differently, but they're not dicks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I have a lot of family that is on the opposite side of that. They
yeah,
are very um hypocritical and very, make their religious opinions known and how that will affect me. Like I had
yeah.
an aunt that like told my mom for years that I was going to burn in hell because I'm gay and I was like, well, I mean, I guess I'll just have to bring some extra sunscreen. Like, I don't know, mom.
Yeah. Well, at least take it in stride.
uh But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you, and I think part like being in the military too, like you tend to get a little bit thicker skin
Yeah.
because of, some of the shenanigans. Like if I was easily offended with everything, then I probably would not have lasted as long as I did.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like just because I was around all of that didn't mean that it was the right thing to be saying those things.
Yeah.
Like people always say, like, oh, this is the new military, the old military when I was in, like, we could do whatever and say whatever, and we don't have to be politically correct and blah 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 and whatever. And like, well, just because you could doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
So
Like I'm not gonna fault you for doing it at the time, but times are changing and maybe you
now
should
you
be
maybe you should know
adaptive a
better.
little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're not, like if the service wants to adapt, but you don't want to, then maybe you shouldn't be a part of it anymore.
Yeah. Maybe it's time to move on.
Yeah. And I think for me, like coming to the end of my career, like, having to, be that one fighting a lot of the time and everything that I realized that like I can't be the only one that's fighting for these things.
No.
That if it's not going to be important to the people above me, and it's not going to be important to the people above them, and it's not going to be important to the service, that like basic things about how we treat each other, then maybe this isn't the place that is the best for me anymore.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of had to put that in my brain and like really like marinate on it for a while, because I have been in this system for so long that like I wanted to be a part of the system. I wanted this service to love me as much as I love them. Like, you're going to be my best friend, even if you don't know it. My wife likes to remind me every day that not everybody wants to be your friend, Jess. Not
Yeah.
everybody's going to be your best friend, and not everybody wants to hug you. I'm like, well, I don't understand those people, so let's just not hang out with them.
Yeah.
Um, that like, you know, it just there just comes a time that you have to do what's best for you at that point.
No. I felt the same way. It was up until like the last 2 years or so I was in. I was like, yeah, I want to do 20 plus. I want to, maybe I was looking at going back active duty at one point, especially after the deployment and everything. It was like, maybe I could do this forever. And then it quickly was like, nah.
Yeah.
Well, that feels like a kind of a natural stopping point in things. We've talked about a lot of endings, a lot of moving ons and such, and it kind of feels like unless there's more things that you would like to let anyone know about, or if you had any final thoughts to put out there to anyone who may be listening.
I don't know.
That's fine. Yeah.
I guess like listen to our stories, and if it resonates with you, like reach out if you have any questions. Like, know you're not alone. Like, maybe people learn things from other experiences, so maybe folks will be able to take something out of all of these podcasts and apply it to their life in a way that will have a positive impact. And I think that at the end of the day, like no matter what career we have, or job we have, or whatever, the the legacy is not going to be the policy that we got through, or um, the stuff that we bought, or whatever else. It's going to be the people that we affected and the impressions that we left. So, take the time, treat people good, and hopefully folks can, find some sort of positive way to impact their lives through our stories.
I think that's
And
well
then maybe
said.
we'll do another podcast that's a little bit more fun and uplifting.
Maybe we can do like a big reunion one day and get everybody, Dan and anybody who wants to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And if you will, I'll try not to be lazy and send me like some of the organizations and stuff you're a part of, and see if I
Okay.
can add a splash screen of reach out if you need to talk to somebody, or if you have these medical issues or whatever. Here are resources, here are phone numbers. All I mean,
Okay.
you don't have to provide all the information. I'll do that work, but if you just tell me who they are and who to put on there, I'll try to get
Okay.
that done.
That sounds good.
Well, thank you very much for sharing all that, and I hope someone out there takes a listen and appreciates it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Alex. Thanks for doing this. And it's nice to be a part of it. And it's nice to see your face.
Yeah, it's awesome talking to you.